Всем добрый день. Меня зовут Репин Александр. Я вас всех рад здесь видеть.
Welcome, and today I'm going to tell you about the response incident remotely and how COVID-19 challenges affected us, how we adapted for that, and how we turned that into our new practices. So once again, that's a mandatory slide about who I am. I'm Alexander Repin. I'm working at the incidences response, and we hope actually our clients respond to the security threats, cybersecurity threats, and actually this has not been connected to SOC services or to anything like that. So it means that any company can turn to us should they have any questions, and we will help them to react to the incidences. Why I'm telling you that? We are acting from the standpoint of acting as a third-party consultant. So it means that we come to some unknown infrastructure, and there might be different types of readiness of IB solutions and a different level of preparedness of the IT specialists, and we have to deal with that. But so let us get back to the year 2005 when there was no COVID yet. So this is how the incident response would look like in case of some third-party customer. So the customer would turn to us, and we would actually then deal with that. We discuss that, and then we would be talking with the technical experts, collecting some relevant data, and that later on would be brought to the office to be analyzed, where we would analyze that altogether in the office, where this process would go on until the incident is totally fixed. In a number of cases, some customers, when it was obvious that the incident investigation is too lengthy, they were ready to provide us with the remote access to the data, but not always so. What happened then? COVID-19 occurred, and that's very bad. You see that the slide is black, so the incidents went on happening. Moreover, there are many more incidences because people start working from home, and not everyone can arrange that work the right way. So it means that there are certain problems related to insufficient protection of that channel. Also, phishing dedicated to COVID-19 goes on, so the incidences take place, but at the same time, we cannot up and go to the customer because of lockdowns. So it means that we have to get some permits, passes. Also, there are certain requirements as to the PCR testing, so it means that you cannot get to the customer at once. And another thing, despite the fact that the people started working from home, and sometimes this would be done with lots of obstacles and difficulties. And letting a third-party contractor getting access to your company's infrastructure would require a week or two of negotiations and agreements. What could be done in such a situation? Well, we addressed the problem of communication and meetings immediately because there were lots of tools for video conferencing. So it was quite easy to get in touch and to communicate, to discuss that. So what was left as to how to collect the data from the client and how to render that data back to the client. Let me start with the second topic because it would take less time. So what options are there? Either we go to the customer with our hard drive and we get the data that the customer has prepared for us. So the limitations there are you have to go there physically, and you have to waste your time waiting until it is all copied and downloaded on hard drive. Second option, if the customer gives us an access to the remote, or to access the infrastructure remotely, we can use VPN or other channels to download the data. The third option that was used even prior to that, I call that an out-of-box solution. Actually, we can share that data. So why this option was not suitable for us? Because such an out-of-box solution did not fit us very well, did not suit us very well. We had to run quotas, meaning that we had to do settings for the sharing of information, and that didn't work very well. We decided to reinvent the wheel, to come up with our own option. And we came up with PT Cloud product. What I can tell you about that? First of all, this is not a cloud at all. This is just a client-server application. The server is located in our premises, so this is our in-house server. It is located in our infrastructure, and we give an ordinary client to the customer, so there are just two buttons to select the file and to send the file. What options are there? So it works fast and smoothly. Within that period of time, until we were using that tool, there has never been the case that certain connections would fail. So the data transferring works very smoothly, very well. And it is convenient for us because we can run backend ourselves, and we can feed that into the pipeline. Just as an example, when we just started working with that tool, the data that we would get from the client, the analyst actually would use SCP in order to upload that onto his computer. But now there is a nice web application, meaning that we immediately see what kind of data we get from what client, and you can do sorting, ranking, ranging, and it eases the work, especially when we have a big data flow. So we have addressed that problem, but the main problem is how to collect the data from the client. The conventional approach is to make images of the disks. So this is a classical forensic approach. What advantages are there? You make an image of a disk, you get all the information that is available from the disk, including the remote data, the on-tag data, and you can restore something. The disadvantages are quite obvious as well. Huge of data, it takes time in order to make an image, to copy that, then you have to store that somewhere. And in essence, the biggest part of that volume is absolutely useless. It's a dead weight. Another thing that we can collect the ISS logs. The customer certainly would have an antivirus and would have a firewall. When we investigate an incident, we ask the client to collect some information security logs, and usually the customer would do that, would upload the quarantine logs and security logs, etc. So the second option looks like the first one. It looks much simpler not to make an image of a drive, but you just can take the virtual drive. Moreover, that the virtual drive may be improvisioned, meaning that would not take the full capacity and won't be too heavy. And what is highlighted is the live response method, when you do not make the copy of an image, but when you use the live system running your utility that would collect the data needed for the investigation, and after that would analyze that data. Moreover, that utility would collect the data not only from the file system, but it would also collect the data, the volatile data, the data about the processes that are on, about the network processes. That's clearly very important for your investigation. At the time, we tried different available tools, and they were not suitable for us. Then we decided to make our own solution. It had to be a very easy plug-and-play application that would collect the data, but then suddenly it became less simple, more sophisticated. We were guided when developing that utility with the following criteria. It had to be easy to launch, plug and play. Sometimes they might be just ordinary system administrators working for the client, not great specialists. So simplicity was our first criterion. Second, the footprint had to be quite little. And criterion number 3, it had to be able to work everywhere. In the sense that, first of all, we focused on Windows infrastructure. Most of the customers still work with Windows. Second unique utility was developed, which is called PT Dumper for the live response. How it looks like. That's an application developed to collect dumps in live response, and it is a Go-based. And we selected Go because the Go-based utility can actually be compiled statically, so it means that we do not have to have any dependencies. And secondly, that utility helps us. That utility is applicable to any Windows version, starting from XP to the most updated ones. But doesn't work for 086. Further on, we developed similar versions for Linux and Macintosh, but they look much simpler. So the main idea of the utility, again, I have highlighted that. You run that with a double click, so it means that there are no keys in the command line, no configuration needed. This is just plug and play. You give the utility to a person who would run that on his computer. The utility would make an archive with all the necessary data. Then this archive would be sent to us, and we start analyzing that. In essence, just any security guy of the data center, once he has an account with the rights of local administrator, can do that, running that on some server, collecting the data. You may ask a question: if it runs with double-clicking, with no keys and configurations, how you provide for flexibility? Well, flexibility lies in the fact that we, as developers, we make the executable file with the features which are needed to us. So it means that the customer doesn't even have to think about the data that has to be collected. What we're collecting, so the set of tools is quite standardized. If you're familiar with forensics, you will understand what it is about. So we are collecting special data, master file table, log files, registry data, task planning files. Logs would be collected, the system logs and the logs of certain software that we know could be used by the malicious agents, for instance, TeamViewer or Mdesk. So it means that we have some default paths that we have to be collected there as well. Also, we are collecting the forensic artifacts. Some traces, footprints of something that was not designed for incidents investigation, but can be used as such. Prefetch the data about the launches of cache, shim cache, some traces of the user activity. Also, we're collecting volatile data, the processes that are on some network connections, cache and DNS content, etc., etc. And also there is another item, miscellaneous. Miscellaneous stands for what? If in the course of investigation we understand that hackers would use this or that folder or that naming for the files, we can add that to the list of data to be collected, and subsequent dumps would contain that data. So it means that we would, by default, collect the data that the hackers have left. This is not the end of the story. We go on expanding our capacity. Not only we collect some binary artifacts, but we decided that part of the artifacts could be parsed in the course of collection. So it means that the data file will contain some parsed data. So it means that the analyst could get some extra data and see cache, sham cache, and see something specifically. And second thing, we also are looking for the files that could be left by the hackers in the system. So, for instance, some malware was introduced and certain files were created, but we do not know by default where these files are. And so it means that we can use certain tools to understand whether certain files are malicious. And so it means that we can collect them immediately. And either it would be based on the time of created or time stamping, e-signatures. In addition, we do some Jara scanning, and in that case we may get some false alarms. But if we collect some malicious files along with the false alarms, it means that we will not have to require that additionally from the client. So you'll get an archive, and it would be 1 gigabyte archive. If it is an Exchange server with lots of logs, then it would be even more spacious. But now we have to scan the whole network of the customer. Why we have to do that? Sometimes the customer doesn't have any means of information security. He'll tell you so. A lot of leakages, there is an incident, and you ask whether you have any firewall or firewall logs. Well, and the client will tell you, actually, we do have a firewall, but it doesn't record any logs. We have antiviral software, but it doesn't run. Second thing, when we have to scan the whole infrastructure is when we have certain indicators that we have obtained from somewhere, and we want to find that in the whole network in order to understand the scope of the viral compromising. Number 3, in the course of investigation, we believe that we have discovered everything, but we want to be on the safe side, to be double sure. We see compromised files, and we scan the whole infrastructure to find something new. Another thing when it can be useful is, for instance, when the incident goes on for some time. For instance, the client detected an incident, but then it turns out that the attack is going on for 3 years. So it means that we will not find the whole information in the logs, and it would be very difficult for us to understand what was the entry point for the hacker. But if we scan that, we can find the traces of some malware that we didn't know anything about. And for instance, we know that they emerged much earlier, and then using the timeline, we can actually see where the attack was launched from. And the fourth reason to start the scanning of the whole infrastructure, that about the retrospective analysis. Colleagues before me spoke about the retrospective analysis, and to this end we came up with PT Scanner utility. What it is about? This is a very simple client-server software that collects the data from the hosts on the network. And again, we set a requirement that it has to be launched easily, that the customer in some cases could do that on their own. So the requirements are not too harsh, so you have to have some network connectivity, and we suggest use port 80. There is some server that receives the files, and the clients would collect automatically necessary data and would send it back to the server. The server actually would just stack it, what the client collects. In the first version, it would be collecting some forensic artifacts, some volatile data, and again the data about the processes launched, the network connections, etc. In addition, there was another functionality to check the files using certain indicators, and Java rules-based scanning could be done. The first version was very simple, overly simple. So the collection of volatile data was done by means of launching console commands such as ipconfig, netstat. But it really worked, and it was very handy. But even prior to COVID, we had such an ambitious goal to develop a software that could be used for the whole infrastructure of the customer. And it had to be interactive. It would be a client server, a client agent, I would call it. And the agent would connect to the server, and from the server you could send certain tasks to the agents to make them collect forensic data. And we had to accelerate that development as well. We used web interface to run that software, and the client was enabled with persist. Means that if you work for quite long within infrastructure, once you deploy your software, the computers would be rebooted, reset, then persistence becomes a problem. And separately, we wanted to make sure that the data would be delivered in an unparsed way. And we developed a lot of modules to collect the data from hosts. Again, that about forensic artifacts, the traces of the user activity, volatile data, and this would be rendered to the server in a normalized way. There would be text files and normalized way, meaning that you can put that into some timeline. The agent now had more functions to run tasks. If you launch some Java scanning and the server is too huge, you can just suspend that task, not to waste time. But still, there is one problem about that solution. Anyway, you have to have an access to the client's infrastructure, at least access to the virtual machine where the server is, because we have to run the tasks. We have made a presetter. What presetter does? You install that on the server, and every new agent which gets connected to the server would actually follow what the preset says, collecting the data. And actually does it offline, and then you can work with it online. Because of that feature, that you need an access to the network, we are not using that solution, not using that solution too widely. But the experience that we got when developing these solutions were not in vain, because we upgraded our initial scanner. We added these modules to it that were developed for a PT responder. So the essence was the same. So the customer just launches the server, and the clients would collect the data, would send it back to the server, but that data would be more spacious and would look nicer. Means that we have more options, what we can see there, what we can collect there. So it means that we are still upgrading that system. We added more features. For instance, the system now enables the server to use the configuration. Well, and let me show you how it works in practice. But in practice, it works the following way. So what these new experience takeaways from COVID times are about? As far as our tools are launched very easily, and as I said, even a security guy can do that. We see that very often we don't even have to get access to the client's infrastructure to start an investigation. So the customer turns to us and says, we have an incident, and for instance, on some machines we have some suspicious activity. We equip them with PT Dumper and PT Cloud, one executable file. So the client would just run PT Dumper on the suspicious hosts, and then the customer using PT Cloud would send the information to us. Then we start analyzing that data. We detect new hosts. We detect new indicators. And again, PT Dumper would run on new hosts, and again, we would analyze that information, and then actually we take a decision that we could scan the whole infrastructure. Then the indicators would be uploaded, Jara rules would be uploaded, it would be scanned, and again we would analyze that data until we win, meaning when we believe that the incident is totally fixed, where we see that we run into the situation that we cannot find anything else. So, what our profit is about? Initially, all these things were developed so that we don't have to go to the customer, because we couldn't go to the customer because of the COVID restrictions. But we even liked that very much, and I will explain why. There are several advantages to that. First, you don't have to go anywhere, because it would save up you a lot of time. And the specialists are sitting in the office or are sitting and analyzing the data. Besides, that's very important in the sense that, for instance, we have certain scheduled working day. We work 5 days a week, but sometimes we are ready to work overtime, working 24/7 if necessary. We can equip the customer with the data collection utility, and if he sends that data promptly back to us, our specialists are ready to embark on the situation almost immediately. For instance, on Saturday night, no one would go to the client to see what is going on there, but probably they can do that from home. So promptness, quick reaction. It means that once the customer turns to us, we would equip him with a utility, and if he runs that utility quickly, then we can proceed with the investigation very quickly and very promptly we can identify certain important things or significant things. For instance, now it goes by default that within 2 hours after the utility is rendered to the client, we can provide him with some important information as how the incident is going on. For instance, in some simple cases, we can identify the entry point or how the hacker is acting. And you can take certain countermeasures, localizing the incident, etc.
Важный момент, что
Okay, everybody is under lockdown, so you can deparallel tasks, meaning when we are waiting for a batch of some data, you can deal with a batch of some other data, so you can run some process in parallel. But for the customer, it's also more simple in many ways because they don't need to have a meeting at the office just to talk about those things related to the incident. And the customer doesn't need to provide any access to infrastructure, which is a headache for many. It takes weeks to obtain the permits, and you need for a token, you need to wait for a token to arrive, and so on and so forth. Sometimes, it's even funny. Well, it's okay, but sometimes it's funny. Customers don't trust us. Well, it happens. Like, everything has been leaked and published and encrypted, and when they come, well, they call us. So we come and they say, well, we don't know who you are. You can mess with our system and you can break it. Well, it sounds like a joke, but it also happens. And we don't need to get into the infrastructure. We know for sure that we are not going to destroy anything there. And our scanner and responder body of work helps us deal with big infrastructures. It has been used repeatedly and it works well. A few words about customers and not, trusting us. We share with them utilities and they often go to VirusTotal. So we give them a dumper and they send it to VirusTotal. Okay, cloud, well, go to VirusTotal. Why? So what are they trying to achieve like that? Some try to reverse it. Well, this is clear. This is interesting. But to publish it at VirusTotal, so will the security vendor send you viruses? Okay, what's the logic behind it? Well, it's quite obscure, isn't it? Okay, one more thing. We understood that some of our customers, when we have dealt with the incident, they're still using our PT dumper utility for their own needs. So they collect data from questionable hosts, they dig into the data and so on. And we thought, okay, if you like it, so you know that they have a track on the security community experts, something like that. So they talk about open source in IB community. So maybe we want to give something to the community and we want our PT dumper to become public because we like it. And now we are trying to see what it is going to look like when we give it to third parties. Because the problem is clear, and we developed it to make it launch in a simple way, and it is not configurable, so we configure it. But when we share it publicly, we'll need to solve the problems. So if you are interested in this, should you have any questions or feedback, so please contact us. We'll try to go through this with you. And that's where my story ends. If you have any questions, I'm ready to take them. Thank you very much. 2 questions. Number 1, the agent capacity, the parsing and pre-processing. So, is it justified? Is it distributed computing? Why are you not doing it on the server side? Well, I think it was justified as a decision. Well, on one hand, the idea was that the data comes like that. Well, indeed, this is a distributed solution. So if I have 2,000 hosts of data sending, or host sending data to the server can have issues surviving. So you try to use some local computing power. Yeah, indeed. We are trying not to use this distributed parsing on the clients if we understand that this can disrupt their operations. So sometimes we just gather binary data and use a dedicated machine in our place. Okay. Active response and counteraction. I think the agents have high privileges, so maybe they can stop the servers, they add something, or is it for XDR? Yeah, this is indeed the EDR domain, and we are not kind of solving this EDR problem. The important thing for us is to collect information. Thank you very much. Another question? For evidence integrity, do you have anything, any features? Yeah, in live response we have some features. Well, like to begin with, what kind of jurisdiction are we talking about? If we talk about Russia and this integrity in the Russian legal field, it will be one thing. In the United States, it's more developed. It will be a different thing. Well, okay, in Russia, we haven't seen cases like that. We try not to deal with it. And as far as I understand your question, the answer might be like that. No, we cannot guarantee anything from this perspective. So this is technical information for technical investigation. On the other hand, as far as I know, talking about, say, a court hearing, so evidence in court, the judge will decide whether this is considered to be evidence or not. So if an expert is ready to come and say, oh, please trust my word, this is evidence, and convince or taking some oath, convince the judge, well, but if the judge has no understanding of this, like what kind of files are these ones, then it's not evidence. Yeah, something like that. Unfortunately, I cannot give you anything better. Hello, Alexander. Thank you for your speech. I have two questions. The first one. In some cases, customer hosts can have information protective means like DLB or some secret net. So, did you consider this when developing the dumper, or do you need does the customer need to apply some new settings to the information protection tools? And can the customer see what kind of data goes to you? So if the regulator say this can be important for the banks, so if so they have these questions, can they say that they don't share any confidential data or bank secrecy data? Okay, for the first question, we regularly face this. The information protection tools try to fight with our tools, and sometimes this happens in some unexpected ways. But this doesn't happen too often, so we don't consider this to be a frequent event. And if this happens, then we're trying to discuss it with the customer and go around it. If for some hosts the scanner cannot be launched, and the customer believes that these hosts are critical and they have to be checked, then we give them a dumper. If the dumper cannot solve the problem, then we go to some old-time solutions like information gathering scripts and so on. So this is a case-by-case thing. I wouldn't say this is a huge problem. The second question is also good. Nothing goes to us in an automated way. Any model used here means that everything stays with the customer infrastructure until they share the data through the cloud. And for sure, they can see everything which is gathered. Yeah, they have a password. Well, this is a good question. We had some customers who said, we want to see what you are gathering with a dumper. and they repack this. They repacked the archives because they wanted to remove the register files because they thought that it would brute their passwords. Well, indeed. We don't want to take any responsibility, taking some confidentiality risks. So the customer should pay attention to this, and they can do it 100%. Thank you for your speech. Could you please highlight the internal nuts and bolts, how the dumper and the scanner collect information? I understand that customers can have different means and logs. I think some customization is needed. It can be an automated harvester or some other way. Thank you. Okay, I'm not sure I got it exactly. Okay, we have a dumper. We have a server collecting the dumper. Okay, we have some web interface. And there we can regulate some features we want or don't want to add to a version. Yeah, exactly, that's what I meant. So this is a ready solution. Okay, where you can kind of develop this for some specific needs. Yeah, you can switch on and off some basic features. Then you can also further develop some regulars for this. You can generate this stuff, and that's how it works. Okay, and so you start with the customer utility. A follow-up question then. You said that customers usually use this utility when you are gone. So do you leave them their customized utility, or do you give them a more expanded version? Yeah, they just consider using the utility we have shared with them for incident investigation. We don't give them anything else after that. Okay, there is an incident. We tell them, please take dumps from these machines. Here is a dumper for this. So they receive this dumper, and then they use the dumper later. So they ask us for their archive password, and then they can have a look at the data gathered. Okay, in this case, can we obtain, say, a more customized build? Okay, we have tried this, we like it, so can we get a customized build well, on order? Okay, here it is. So we can go there. No, not yet. That's not what we're talking about. We want to make this public in such a way that on one hand it should stay quite simple, but to let people customize this for their needs. Now, at this level, we haven't had any requests like, okay, this is a great dumper, but we want this and this. So maybe they didn't know about this. Yeah, people would humbly continue using whatever they have. But you should understand this thing. Customization is not usually about some nuclear things. All the important things are gathered in every build. And, well, for one customer, well, maybe it's not that important. Hello, thank you for your speech. The PT dumper, does it analyze or look for remote files? Does it restore it? No, it doesn't. And the second question, the PT scanner, do you launch it on hosts, or does it gather data remotely? Well, it is launched on hosts. So the exe file, which is spread through the hosts, and it's launched there. So the dumper and the scanner on target. Yeah. In one case it's more centralized, in the other case it's more pinpoint. But although this is host-based, and the scanner will collect less information. Yes, less. Because this is designed for quicker stream analysis, and if we deal with large infrastructures, then, so if we collect data, the same volume the dumper would collect, it becomes too much data. Okay. Now, what about deleted files? Do you skip them? Well, sometimes we have to make a compromise. Like, recovering deleted files is not a trivial job. Well, one thing, when you have a FAT32 USB key, then you can easily do this. And when it's deleted but not re-recorded. But when you have a live system, when you have deletions and recordings all the time, so I think they have dealt with RStudio and other file recovery software. There you scan the whole space, and it tells you, I have found 20 terabytes of deleted data on your 40 gigabyte disk. So if you add this to a dumper, then this becomes extremely long, and for this you need to run a lot of theoretical work in terms of approaches to restore information, and this is not exactly what we need, because we are trying to strike some balance between our speed and the completeness of the data we collect. If following the dump analysis we see that, say, on a machine there can be interesting deleted files, we'll just ask for the image, and we will use the image to recover data. Well, we even didn't think about adding this to the dumper. So you don't need it so often. Do you mean this? Yeah, we don't use it quite often. So does it mean that they are not covering their traces? Well, they are doing it all the time. But in practice, chances of recovering these traces are small. So the things that leave behind are enough. Well, it would be nice to restore everything, but quite often it just doesn't work, whether we like it or not. Okay, thank you. Alexander, thank you very much for your speech and for highlighting some nuts and bolts of the way you respond to incidents. I have a number of questions. Firstly, are these tools only for the Windows platforms? So PT Tamper and PT Scanner, do they work on Linux machines? Well, no. We have Linux versions and we have Mac versions. But they have some features. For Linux, there are fewer forensic artifacts, and there the dumper is much more straightforward, just like for Mac. And for the scanner, we have a version for Linux, and it collects a different set of data, not like the one in Windows. There are some similarities, but since these OSs are different, the data set is going to be different. And the scanner server is universal. You can run it on a Windows-based virtual machine, and the Linux clients can also send their data, and vice versa. But it doesn't work with PT Responder this way. It is designed for Windows only. Question 2. I believe there are some other solutions like Redline and FRA. And have you compared them, your version, to the previous ones? Well, we started developing this even before the COVID times. I think we had some competitive analysis. And what makes it better than Redline? I can't tell you now. I mean, at that time we decided that we would make our own light version, and it will cover all our needs, and we will be able to customize it the way we want it. Now it has become what it is. and now we want to support our own utility rather than trying to look for something new. Okay, so you cannot tell us. Well, we have compared, but I cannot tell. Okay, and the results you have following the PT damper and scanner work. So do you feed this to one infrastructure and analyze it as a whole, or does every expert kind of sort out this raw dump? So do you have an interface to send all the results and deal with them as a whole? Well, we don't have this interface now. The pipeline for processing all of this is now under development. And today, indeed, analysts just analyze. So you can launch some things for big arrays of data. We have scripts for this, but this is not a system. I mean, every red line has the same thing. So we bring it on a USB channel, so it launches this and it shows you, so you can see it, it's not encrypted, you can look at it with the eyes, and then you send it to one system and you analyze it all together, say from 10 machines, to see what kind of services were launched. And you can also tick some boxes, like to collect dump of the memory, and so I have seen Redline. Yeah, but you don't have this. No, we don't. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, COVID and remote work. Well, apart from the computers in the network, in the company infrastructure, we have a lot of user computers at home. And quite often they are the weakest link of our network. So the system administrator gives you the VPN access, and that's what we have. So have you had any tasks like that when you had to deal with the user computers, and how did you document this when dealing with the customer? Well, we had this. This was related to scenarios like that. The threat actor gets the VPN access without brute force or something, so they use the credentials of a user to access the network. Here comes the question, how come? Maybe somebody leaked their credentials. So the first hypothesis is that maybe they hacked their home computer and stole the VPN certificate and the password, and so on. Okay, this happens often. Indeed, we don't document it in any way with the customer. I just tell the customer, we believe that we should have a look at this home machine because maybe it is the source of the leak. And then the customer will decide what to do, how they are going to solve the problem of this intrusion into their private life, so to say. Well, technically speaking, it's all the same. We can launch a dumper there and have a look. Okay, thanks. Hello, Nikita Panov. Does your dumper work in Mac OS? Yes, it works in Mac OS, but I'm not ready to tell you exactly what it collects there. So we have a dumper for Mac OS. Do you have a more specific question? Well, you know, so what do you mean by this? Yeah, it can be launched there, that's for sure. It also uploads some logs and lists. So the things we consider important, so they can be gathered there. Okay, it can work there. Yes, we have a dumper for Mac OS.
Так, ну вроде все. Я должен футболки, да, раздать?
Okay, I think it's time for rewarding you with t-shirts. One goes here, the distribution-related question, and this one goes to you for customization.